Good evening and welcome back to another episode of The Longing, where today we will be continuing to read The Golden Age by Kenneth Grahame. So, let's get going. What do they talk about, Charlotte? I inquired, wishing to pacify Edward. You go out with them sometimes. I don't know, said poor Charlotte dolefully. They make me walk behind because they say I'm too little and mustn't hear. And I do want to so, she added. When any lady comes to see Aunt Eliza and said Harold, they both talk at once all the time, and yet each of them seems to hear what the other one's saying. I can't make out how they do it. Grown-up people are so clever. The curate's the funniest man, I remarked. He's always saying things that have no sense in them at all, and then laughing at them as if they were jokes. Yesterday, when they asked him if he'd have some more tea, he said, "Once more onto the breach, dear friends, once more," and then sniggered all over. I didn't see anything funny in that, and then somebody asked him about his buttonhole, and he said, "'Tis but a little faded flower," and exploded again. I thought it very stupid. "Oh, him," said Edward contemptuously. "He can't help it, you know. It's a sort of way he's got. But it's these girls I can't make out. If they've anything really sensible to talk about, how is it nobody knows what it is? And if they haven't, and we know they can't have naturally, why don't they shut up their jaw? This old rabbit here, he doesn't want to talk. He's got something better to do." And Edward aimed a ginger beer cork at the unruffled beast, who never budged. "Oh, but rabbits do talk," interposed Harold. "I've watched them often in their hutch. They put their heads together and their noses go up and down, just like Selina's and the vicarage girls. Only, of course, I can't hear what they're saying." "Well, if they do," said Edward unwillingly, "I'll bet they don't talk such rot as those girls do," which was ungenerous as well as unfair. For it had not yet transpired, nor has it to this day, what Selina and her friends talked about. The Argonauts. The advent of strangers of whatever sort into our circle had always been a matter of grave dubiety and suspicion. Indeed, it was generally a signal for retreat into caves and fastnesses of the earth, into unthreaded copses or remote outlying cowsheds, whence we were only to be extricated by wily nursemaids, rendered familiar by experience with our secret runs and refuges. It was not surprising, therefore, that the heroes of classic legend, when first we made their acquaintance, failed to win our entire sympathy at once. Confidence, says somebody, is a plant of slow growth, and these stately dark-haired demigods, with names hard to master and strange accoutrements, had to win a citadel already strongly garrisoned with a more familiar soldiery. Their chill foreign goddesses had no such direct appeal for us as the mocking malicious fairies and witches of the north. We missed the pleasant alliance of the animal, the fox who spread the bushiest of tails to convey us to the enchanted castle, the frog in the well, the raven who croaked advice from the tree. And, to Harold especially, it seemed entirely wrong that the hero should ever be other than the youngest brother of 3. This belief, indeed, in the special fortune that ever awaited the youngest brother as such, the borough English of fairy, had been of baleful effect on Harold, producing a certain self-conceit and perkiness that called for physical correction. But even in our admonishment we were on his side, and as we distrustfully eyed these new arrivals, old Saturn himself seemed something of a parvenu. Even strangers, however, if they be good fellows at heart, may develop into sworn comrades. And these gay swordsmen, after all, were of the right stuff. Perseus, with his cap of darkness and his wonderful sandals, was not long in winging his way to our hearts. Apollo knocked at Admetus's gate in something of the right fairy fashion. Psyche brought with her an unorthodox palace of magic, as well as helpful birds and friendly ants. Ulysses, with his captivating shifts and strategies, broke down the final barrier, and henceforth the band was adopted and admitted into our Freemasonry. I had been engaged in chasing Farmer Larkin's calves, his special pride, round the field, just to show the man we hadn't forgotten him, and was returning through the kitchen garden with a conscience at peace with all men, when I happened upon Edward grubbing for worms in the dung heap. Edward put his worms into his hat, and we strolled along together, discussing high matters of state. As we reached the tool shed, strange noises arrested our steps. Looking in, we perceived Harold, alone, rapt, absorbed, immersed in the special game of the moment. He was squatting in an old pig trough that had been brought in to be tinkered, and as he rhapsodied, anon he waved a shovel over his head, anon dug it into the ground with the action of those who would urge Canadian canoes. Edward strode in upon him. "What rot are you playing at now?" he demanded sternly. Harold flushed up, but stuck to his pig trough like a man. "I'm Jason," he replied defiantly, "and this is the Argo. The other fellows are here too, only you can't see them, and we're just going through the Hellespont, so don't you come bothering." And once more he plied the wine-dark sea. Edward kicked the pig trough contemptuously. "Pretty sort of Argo you've got," said he. Harold began to get annoyed. "I can't help it," he replied. "It's the best sort of Argo I can manage, and it's all right if you only pretend enough, but you never could pretend one bit." Edward reflected. "Look here," he said presently, "why shouldn't we get hold of Farmer Larkin's boat and go right away up the river in a real Argo and look for Medea and the Golden Fleece and everything? And I'll tell you what, I don't mind your being Jason, as you thought of it first." Harold tumbled out of the trough in the excess of his emotion. "But we aren't allowed to go on the water by ourselves," he cried. "No," said Edward with fine scorn, "we aren't allowed, and Jason wasn't allowed either, I dare say, but he went." Harold's protest had been merely conventional. He only wanted to be convinced by sound argument. The next question was, how about the girls? Selina was distinctly handy in a boat. The difficulty about her was that if she disapproved of the expedition, and morally considered it was not exactly a Pilgrim's Progress, she might go and tell, she having just reached that disagreeable age when one begins to develop a conscience. Charlotte, for her part, had a habit of daydreams, and was as likely as not to fall overboard in one of her rapt musings. To be sure, she would dissolve in tears when she found herself left out, but even that was better than a watery tomb. In fine, the public voice, and rightly perhaps, was against the admission of the skirted animal, spite the president of Atlanta, who was one of the original crew. "And now," said Edward, "who's to ask Farmer Larkin?" "I can't. Last time I saw him, he said when he caught me again he'd smack my head." "You'll have to." I hesitated for good reasons. "You know those precious calves of his?" I began. Edward understood at once. "All right," he said. "Then we won't ask him at all. It doesn't much matter. He'd only be annoyed, and that would be a pity. Now, let's set off." And with that, we come to the end of the reading portion, because we have run out of time. So, we're about halfway through this book now. It is taking quite a lot longer to read than I had intended, but that is fine. That is fine. We're definitely not getting through it as quick as some of the other books. I think so far it's taken us 17 episodes to do about 90 pages. So we're doing maybe 6 to 7 pages a time, which is not a lot really for reading. I think we were averaging about 9 or 10 for some of the other books, so we are really going slower. But anyway, I will say thank you very much for joining me today, I hope you all have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon or night. No matter what time of day it is, I hope you all have a wonderful one of it. And as always, we will be back tomorrow for more of The Longing. Goodbye.